Welp, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. It's episode number 4. How about that, Liam? 4 episodes in. It's wild. They haven't kicked us off yet. I guess we're on the best channel for us not to get kicked off on No Filter Network. But nevertheless, we are back, baby. It is a huge, huge weekend in racing. We have the roar before the 24, the precursor weekend leading up to the 62nd running of the Rolex 24. And it's going to be a lot of fun, man. It is going to be an exciting 2 weeks over at Daytona International Speedway. You know your friend, your IMSA covered man, if you will, Dylan Spalding will be there covering the races, covering the events. We got some exciting stuff happening this weekend. I've told Liam this. I don't know if anybody here on the YouTube page knows anything about it, but we're going to make maybe a little bit of announcement as well there coming up here towards the end of the show. But we got the roar before the 24. We got Supercross this weekend. We got a lot of racing news to get into. It has just been a wild last 2 weeks, Liam, and the racing season is back, man. It is back. I mean, you can't even tell me otherwise, but racing is in full swing. You know, people will debate when the racing season kind of begins here in the US. You know, some people say it's the Rolex 24, right? It's one of the biggest races of the year, and this is like one of the gems of the season. You know, for us, we kind of look at last week with Formula E kind of coming back in, and you know, Supercross getting their season started. We kind of look at that as being kind of the little opener, maybe a little appetizer, if you will, for the season. So, you know, whatever you guys consider being your beginning of the racing season, no matter what, we're just excited to see racing back in full swing. There's a lot of content coming out, a lot of news as teams are preparing for their races. We got NASCAR coming up in February. I mean, there's just so much to drive into here. And Liam, happy to be with you, man. Back at it again, and it's gonna be a very busy show tonight. There's gonna be a lot to talk about.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you for keep having me back. Um, Always a pleasure. I mean, 4 shows feels more like 5, in my opinion.
Mhm.
It's been a long road already, but much longer to come. And yeah, man, the season is upon us. The cold, dark night is over, and the
Yeah,
racing content is finally back on us.
yeah, it has been a busy couple weeks for sure. A lot of news coming out. A lot of news coming out this week and this past week between IndyCar and some news came out today regarding NASCAR. There's some NASCAR rule changes we'll get into as well here tonight that were kind of controversial, if you will. So again, a lot to cover, a lot to discuss, and we're excited to bring it to you here on the show tonight. Let's kind of begin here with an event that kind of felt a little close to home for me. Daytona ARCA testing happened last week. I got a chance to actually be there with City Garage Motorsports. I was actually credentialed by the team. I was an official team member, if you will. Got to have dinner with the group, dinner with the team. First, I want to thank Stuart Weiss, Jason Smith, Becca Monopoly, who gave me some time after testing, and the rest of the team. Logan, who is one of the crew guys as well with City Garage Motorsports, he was awesome as well. He was my car ride over to Daytona, so we had some great stories to share. And actually, he just got engaged. Actually, he just proposed to his girlfriend. He is now has a fiance. So congratulations to him. And man, what an incredible week to get coverage of the ARCA test. Being involved with City Garage Motorsports, Becca ran really well, had some troubles with the car on Thursday, transmission problems, had to change out the dashboard. So Thursday was a bit of a wash, although there was a great event early on in the day, able to promote the Orlando Health Hospital opening in Lake Mary. And then Friday gets out on track, improves on her lap times as she's going around Daytona International Speedway, getting her first chance to be in the draft. She was actually saying how she got her first opportunity to be in the getting drafted from behind, which is a weird experience, she said, for her, but getting great experience and a lot of exciting stuff happening with City Garage Motorsports. But I mean, looking at that grid last week, man, you had Helio Castroneves, who ran very well. Amber Balkin led the way in testing over the 2 days. She actually had left after the first day. Or no, she tested both days, but she still led the test timing over the 2 days in terms of the combined test times. So lot to just look at. Again, Helio Castroneves ran well. Catherine Legg had a really nice, solid test as well. The Gibbs guys always have really solid tests. Willie Mullins looked good. Uh, it was a lot of fun, man, to be there, be kind of in a different capacity, if you will. It was a lot of fun, and really happy to be able to have gotten this experience, and looking forward to more stuff to come within City Garage Motorsports. But Liam, ARCA testing was a bit wild, and looking at the ARCA grid, we talked about this a little bit on the last show. It's going to be a highly contested grid here coming up in 2025.
Absolutely. I'm curious who stood out to you, if you forgive the expression, with the vibes. Who did you feel was really locked in? Who did you think really was excited to be there and excited to be hitting that track?
It's a good question. That is a good question. I mean, just being around the garage and being around, the paddock, I guess you if you will say for us, who enjoy the British racing culture or European racing culture. Um, I would say, I mean, Helio definitely looked good. He looked strong. He seemed to be focused on getting work done. Um, there were a lot of teams, man, that really looked strong. Venturini brought a good fleet together. They looked really strong as well. Corey Day was another one that seemed to look locked in. He just signed a big deal with Hendricks, and now he's going to be running some ARCA races, some Trans Am, some trucks, some Xfinity. So I would say those are a couple of people that stand out. Again, focusing on a specific driver, and focusing on a specific team, it kind of made things challenging, and kind of seeing how the rest of the field played out, because you're kind of wanting to cover your team, if you will. A little bit of a different dynamic from that end, but nevertheless, it was still a lot of fun. It was great, man. I mean, Helio Castroneves was literally right next to us in the pit box, and I mean, it seemed like he was finding a lot of speed as well, and he's looking to have a pretty strong ride here for the ARCA season. And again, to see these names, man, on this entry list, like Leg and Grant Enfinger, who was just in the truck championship battle, if you will, just a couple months ago. I mean, there were some pretty big names, and it's going to be a challenge, man, for a lot of these ARCA teams who, they bring in all these young guns, young studs, if you will, in racing, who are moving their way up. And then you bring guys like who are already established within some of these higher racing levels and higher series. Like, it's going to be a challenge for some of these ARCA teams this year, at least for Daytona, where there's going to be some heavy hitters coming into that race.
Has an ARCA race like this ever been a hotbed of that amount of talent? Do you feel? Do you feel like there are people who are trying to get that, who
Yeah.
especially want that experience at Daytona, even if it's not at the highest level necessarily
I
that
think
there
it's
is?
changed ever since NASCAR took over, right? Like, once NASCAR took over in 2019, it has greatly expanded and has made it more of a proving ground for NASCAR drivers. And I believe Stewart had mentioned this too, is like some 300 or 200 drivers who are currently in the top levels of NASCAR have competed through like ARCA. Like, a ton of guys basically have gone through ARCA and have gotten to the Cup Series, or have gotten to like a top 3 series. So I think it has changed a lot, and you're seeing more heavy players in terms of teams. I mean, when you have a Joe Gibbs on the grid, definitely looks it's a bit intimidating when you have haulers like that come in. And it was funny, Stewart on a podcast today, my buddy's podcast, Angel Martinez, who is one of our good partners as well with the show. He was kind of mentioning too, he's like, while it's nice to have a big hauler, and you see a lot of these teams with the big haulers, at the end of the day in ARCA, you don't need a big hauler to race well. All you need is a small little hauler, because you want to put more improvements in that car. You want to get that car better. So again, I think we are going into a I don't know, a growing period here for ARCA. I think there's a lot of exciting drivers developing and racing. I mentioned to this last week. I just think there is a lot of talent that sometimes gets overlooked because of how much talent there is right now in racing. And I think ARCA provides another layer and another platform for these drivers to get really good stock car racing experience. So, we'll see. We'll see how this series continues to grow. Hey, maybe more Cup teams and Xfinity teams who have a really large presence may say, hey, we want to start up an ARCA team because we feel like there is a lot of potential in terms of us allowing another opportunity for our drivers to get kind of a proving ground. Because for some of these Cup teams, they don't have an Xfinity program. They have to go through other programs to get give their drivers Xfinity shots or give them, seat time. So, we'll see. We'll see how the series grows going forward.
Cool. It's really exciting.
It is. It is very exciting for sure. So a lot to talk about there with ARCA testing. A little bit about Supercross this weekend. We saw Chase Sexton win the race for KTM, Red Bull KTM Factory Racing, grabbing the season opening win and cruising the victory on his KTM bike. Jet Lawrence ran into some problems early, got caught up in like one of the big hay bale blocked things that kind of are on the side of the track. Just horrid beginning of the season for Jet Lawrence. Same goes for Hayden Deegan. Deegan crashed out early in the 250 race, basically ended his night as well in the main event. Unfortunately, Malcolm Stewart had a big crash that happened where he kind of got caught up a little jiggly in the whoops if you will, and was thrown off his bike. It was actually a pretty hard throw off, but he was able to get back in and actually made the main event. But nevertheless, Chase Sexton wins in 450s, able to cruise to victory in that race, and Joe Shimoda able to grab his first A1 victory as well, as he also cruised to victory in a race that he pretty much led from the get-go. Both riders actually led from the get-go there, so that is kind of your Anaheim update. Again, they'll be back at San Diego this weekend at the new Snapdragon Stadium, which is a pretty snazzy looking venue, if I say so myself. And as for the final thing, we'll recap from this past weekend. It was Formula E in Mexico City this weekend. And Liam, this again, series that hits home, so we know a lot about this series. We both are very extensive in terms of our coverage. And how about it? Oliver Rowland. I decided to wear the hat. I broke it out for this occasion. Oliver Rowland picks up his fourth career Formula E victory for Nissan, and in a race that was filled again with another big strategy race. I mean, it was another attack mode strategy race that we saw play out again here this weekend, and Oliver Rowland timed it out perfectly. Everybody at the top of the grid were had already used all their attack mode time, and Rowland had whatever was left, and he was able to use it to his advantage, made the pass on both Porsches, and was able to grab the win. It was quite an exciting race. It may have not had all the wildness that the season opener did in Sao Paulo, but it was a very entertaining race, and I thought it was good. I thought it was a good way to kind of kickstart the 2025 portion of the season.
I completely agree with you, Dylan. It definitely exceeded my expectations in the sense that it had all of the best parts of that first race in Mexico with the attack mode, with that strategy, but with none of the crazy reliability issues, with none of that chaotic stuff that it can be fun sometimes, but if it's happening every race, then it's not really a competition anymore as much as it is a free for all, just luck. To me, this is a moment where Formula E is really coming into its own. That's how I feel about it. I really feel like the identity, the way the cars look, the way the cars drive, finally that strategy with the attack mode, it has all come together where the racing product is really, really exciting to me. And I had a smile on my face the entire time watching this race this weekend.
It was great. I mean, I thought I did think that the middle of the race did kind of, I don't want to say drag a little bit, but I do think that drivers kind of settled in, and I think weren't being as aggressive as maybe they were early on. Like, it felt very aggressive early in the race. We saw Jake Dennis made like a huge push to the front on his attack mode. That was impressive to see. He ended up finishing fourth, which is a solid performance. And when I wrote about the recap here for that race, I said, Dennis really does seem more aggressive in these last handful of races. I mean, you looked at the last season, finale at London, he was super aggressive. You know, Sao Paulo, it wasn't the greatest race for Andretti, but then you look at this race, another very aggressive Jake Dennis, and in a race that honestly he could have very well have won. I mean, he's been very good at Mexico City in the past, so um, I think Jake Dennis has a lot to fight for this year, just given the fact of how 2024 played out for him and the way the season kind of went. It was a lot of bad luck situations and kind of ups and downs. He had the early race win, and then things just kind of didn't go the way he wanted it to towards the end of the season. But he was still within the championship hunt, even though he was kind of out of it really by Portland. Once we got to Portland, even though he still had a mathematical shot, it was pretty much over for Dennis. But I do think that this year is a big rebound here for him, just given how last year ended. And, we'll see if, the thing about Formula E is, teams aren't usually committed to their drivers as much as other series. And I don't want to say it in a bad way, but you see a lot of driver changes in Formula E. And obviously some drivers go and on to do bigger and better things in terms of going to different series and stuff and maybe trying out their hand. But there is a lot of driver movement around. So we'll see what Dennis brings to the table this year in 2025. But I think this is a really big year, and I think he's going to be a very tough guy to try to battle with and contest with on the grid this year.
He's hungry, that's for sure.
No, he
And
definitely is.
he's probably going to make a couple more enemies, over the season if he keeps at it like this.
He might be the Ross Chastain of Formula E, like 2 years ago, where Ross Chastain just kept making enemies every week.
100%, but it's going to be really fun to watch. So
it is.
He's welcome to try.
And we love Dennis. Dennis is a great guy. So listen, if you want to add some more drama, you want to add some more fuel to the fire, I will gladly take that. Although, I would say this: do it in a good way. Don't do it in a way that's gonna basically just get you penalized, or basically
Right.
the steer is basically blatantly moving guys out of the way. But listen, I mean, that's what makes Formula E, right? It's an aggressive series. These guys are hungry. These guys feel like some of these guys have made Formula E a home, and then you have a lot of guys, and they made this kind of their career at this point. And then you have other guys too who they feel like they have something to prove. Like they didn't get their shot in F1, right? They didn't get their shot in some of these high end series. So for a lot of these guys, they are hungry. They want to prove something. They know there is still a shot to get a F1 for like some of these younger drivers. Like there is still chances to, get big opportunities, in other series. And nothing, not that I'm not saying that Formula E isn't a big opportunity, but, there are a lot of big series around the world. And for some of these guys, they may want to try out different things, or maybe, try to get back into that discipline that they originally had hoped to be in. And so there is a lot that these guys can achieve when they're in Formula E that can help them move along in their career path and goals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just because the competition is so close, it really is just you in the car and what you can do with it. So that's another part of it that makes it so obviously exciting to watch, but also I'm sure puts some more stress on the drivers where they're like, wow, I really do have to show what I can do, because you can't hide behind the machinery as much in Formula E as you can in some other racing series.
No, absolutely. No, you're 100% right. And just looking back at the results from the race, again, Oliver Rowland grabbing the win and a little bit of a surprise victory. I mean, most people like Oliver Rowland, obviously great driver, and always has been, and he definitely has shots to win races. 1-2 last year, obviously with Nissan. It was actually a pretty big year for Oliver Rowland and was well in the hunt for the championship. So he kind of adds his name, if you will, into this championship hunt. And I think, Nissan looked, at least for Oliver Rowland, Rowland looked pretty strong in the race. So, definitely impressed by him. Just looking at some of the other results as well. I mean, we can't not talk about Porsche. What a race for Porsche, man. What a race for Porsche. And, they seem like the strongest team on the grid. It seems like Jaguar is still dealing with some stuff. Like Mitch Evans had a very rough race, and Nick Cassidy was nowhere to be found in this race. I mean, rough start for Jaguar to open up the year. Obviously a lot of season left, so a lot of time, but there's really isn't a lot of time left, right? It's 14 rounds. It's not a very long season. So, there is still a lot, I think, that needs to get worked on with Jaguar. And and we'll see how Nick Cassidy and Mitch Evans fare when they go to Jeddah, the first doubleheader weekend, which also means the debut of attack mode coming up here at Jeddah, which is going to be, or attack charge, excuse me, which is going to be a very interesting thing. We have been big fans of attack charge. We've been talking about this even into from last year, and it's going to be exciting to see how that aspect of the strategy plays a factor, because that's going to be a whole different can of worms that we have no idea what's going to be played out during attack charge and during that implementation heading into the Jeddah weekend.
It's almost crazy to me that just when we finally have the attack mode strategy kind of ironed out and there's a kind of excuse me, a kind of logic to it, they're adding a completely different wild card too. So we
Yep.
pretty much just went from one whole kind of sport to we're kind of getting another layer to that now. So definitely gonna be really interesting to see. I don't think anyone knows what to really expect from that. So
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
gonna keep everyone on their toes. That's for sure.
it's definitely going to add an extra layer to the crew, like for the teams, right? It's going to be a new challenge for a lot of these teams. I don't know how that's going to work. Who is going to be the ones to be doing this attack charge? Like, I mean, Liam, adding attack charge is such a big step for the series, right? Because the series has really never had pit stops outside of like the guys changing cars. I mean, that's really kind of been the only pit stops that they've had, and that really wasn't a pit stop. Like, it was more just getting into a brand new freaking car. So going into attack charge, right? If this works well, and this is something that's can be expanded upon and implemented as a regular thing, what else could Formula E bring? Because it's great. Like Formula E is an exciting series. You got attack mode that's now finally working well. You have you know exciting racing, bumper to bumper action. These guys aren't scared to break a fender, or break a piece of their wing or anything like that. But like you know I think for a lot of fans, they wouldn't mind seeing pit stops or tire changes, right? It adds another layer on top of this series and makes it more like a natural racing series, right? And again, it is a natural racing series, but there are a lot of things that Formula E does that are completely different than what any other series does. If attack charge goes well, for one, do you think they expand on it? And number two, do they add other implementations like adding tire changes or expanding the length of races now that they have an attack charge? How do you think that Formula E can expand on this going forward in making maybe the races more complex with the strategy?
That's a great question. I think the length of the races is probably going to be the next thing that we see change, because I do
Mm-hmm.
think Formula E does want to eventually be a longer, not just kind of a sprint race kind of format like it is now, but something that can go the distance, if you will, and kind of compete
40,
with the
50
other
laps. Yeah.
single seat series in that sense. I don't see anything like maybe tire changes coming, at least for a long time. I think for a couple of reasons. I mean, already the way the tires work in some racing series, it can be a little artificial where like tire technology is really good. And the truth is,
Mm-hmm.
if we wanted tires to last a whole race, there are ways to do that. And I just don't see it for Formula E also because that's not the focus of the series. I think a big thing with the attack charge is the focus it puts on the technical aspect as well. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's true, the way it has been, where it's like the race is always on the racetrack and it is just the drivers getting settled in and you see the cars going, but there's not as much focus on what's going on underneath them and things like that. So having those pit stops, I think, really plays into what the brand of Formula E is. Tire changes, that's not why we're here, right? We want to see this electric technology being pushed as far as it can go.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, maybe when they expand, if they, I mean, you mentioned them expanding the races in terms of the length is kind of their next thing, right? And I actually agree with that. I think that has to be the next goal as the technology continues to get better, as it continues to the length of these batteries and the lifespan of them as they continue to be able to be kind of tested, if you will, and be maybe lengthened out over a more extended period of time. That is going to be something that I think Formula E would like to implement is longer races because if you're a fan, right, and you're going to these Formula E races, that one day goes by quick. We know that from being at Portland. It is a quick day. It literally starts at 9 and ends at 2. It is a very, very short day. So to have a longer race would be great for one. It will keep fans at the track more, right? It will, and number two, I think it will also entice more fans to want to come out, right? It's going to be like, oh, well, now we're getting like an hour and 20-minute race or an hour and 40-minute race. Now we get more action. Like now we're going to get more racing. And I think fans want that. Like we want more racing. We want more track time. We want to see these guys go out for 40 to 50 laps a weekend. So, and maybe it's not every weekend. Maybe it's like a Formula One thing where like these double headers, you do one sprint race and one full race. And that is another option too. So I think Formula E has a lot to play with here in the coming years. I get where you're coming from on the tire changes. I do think though if they do expand the races, I do feel like tire changes will have to be something they would probably need to address just in case. And I think that would be more so if the tires do become if it gets to a point where the tires do become a little bit, they're kind of degrading over the span of the race, that might be something that the series addressed. But I think Attack Charge is going to be very exciting. I think there's a lot of unknown questions and a lot of wonder of like, how is this going to work? How effective is it going to be? Like attack mode is finally really getting to be effective and really making these races exciting. And I think there's going to be a lot of things that will be answered at Jeddah. And remember, attack mode's still going to be in play for the Jeddah race. So it's going to even add an extra layer on top of the already new layer that's being added. So it is going to be a very wild race. It is one of the more true street courses. I guess you could say Brazil is a street course as well with Mexico. But I mean, this is going to be a more true street race. Obviously, the Jeddah F1 track is going to be the host, and it is a bit of a shortened circuit. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun, man. The Jeddah race is going to be cool, and we will see how the strategy works for attack mode again. I mean, that's really been the story right now early on in the year is like how how much of a player is attack mode in terms of the strategy. Obviously, these last two races, it was big in terms of strategy, but how is it going to be for Jeddah? It depends on where they place it, depends on how drivers use it and how effective it is at the track given the layout. So I think there's a lot of things that are going to be answered. I'm looking forward to seeing how attack mode plays out as we go to different circuits, different layouts, different formats. It's going to make things really interesting going forward.
Absolutely. And you've got to wonder what the drivers are thinking right now with all of
Oh,
that too.
absolutely.
And they're finally getting a handle on this thing, and now there's going to be it's going to be a whole new ball game in just another month. So should be
Yeah.
interesting.
No, it's gonna be a pretty crazy thing, man. It's exciting to see where Formula E is going. There's a lot of excitement.
I'd also just like to point out that both weeks that we've done our predictions for Formula E, I've picked Anthony Felix da Costa, and both weeks he has been leading the race until like the last 5 laps or whatever. So I've been getting real close, but we'll
He's
see.
coming. He's coming. Well, we have how many more weeks do we have to our next race? It's February, right? Yeah, the 14th and the 15th, weekend of the 500. Talk about a big weekend there. Uh, yeah, we will definitely be making our picks for that weekend. That'll be a lot of fun, and we'll see if one of us will get a race right. I promise you that we will get a race weekend right. I almost had it myself with Pascal. I picked Pascal in one of my races or in one of my predictions with my buddy, and then I also picked Mortara, who did not finish very well. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, but we'll get to see him this weekend. Maybe he'll be running well with the Lamborghini IMSA team. So we shall see. All right, let's get into some news from the last week or two. There's actually a boatload of news actually from the last week or two, beginning with NASCAR rule changes. This is always a interesting topic whenever a series makes rule changes, but these were a little bit more notable and a little bit more controversial. The news changes came out by NASCAR, or the rule changes came out by NASCAR last Friday, and the news was that NASCAR will be taking away playoff points for drivers that miss out on races that are non-medical related. So suspension, basically the double for Kyle Larson, if you will. I call this the Kyle Larson rule because it's basically kind of why it's being created is because of what happened last year with Larson. Very interesting with this rule, Liam. A lot to unpack here. First off, the the driver will no longer have playoff points, and then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they can't acquire more playoff points. So this is a pretty big decision by NASCAR, and a bold one at that. One that I think a lot of people are in the mix about. And then the other rule is the open exemption rule, and meaning that if a driver has a good enough resume, they are actually able to be from exempt and allowed to be in a race without having to qualify, basically, or they will qualify. If they don't qualify, then they're in. So, for the example, if Helio Castroneves does not make the 500, he will be the 41st car. If he makes it in, he will be the 40th car, and then that will be your field. So, a lot to unpack there. Let's begin with the first kind of set of rules: the playoff, basically removal of points because of the non-medical waiver, if you will, non-medical reason. What are your thoughts about some of these? What are your thoughts about that rule change, and kind of the notableness of it? Given especially too, if a Kyle Larson, if he runs into the similar issue that he did last year, that's a big thing to do for a guy who's arguably one of the biggest names in NASCAR and in motorsports in general.
Clearly, someone's feelings got hurt last year. I don't know who it was, but they're coming down kind of harsh on it. I'm pretty surprised. I mean, especially not acquiring playoff points after that. I mean, that's as harsh I think as it gets. I almost wonder if it has something to do. I'm sure it doesn't, but just thinking, IndyCar being on Fox now and maybe becoming more of a competitor in the next couple years. Do you think NASCAR is maybe trying to crack down on some other just some of the other series that are starting to get more attention, and that they don't want their drivers to get any ideas to maybe engage with them?
I just think it's such a blown marketing opportunity. Like, you're going to get so much money and revenue off of marketing that Larson's going into the Indy 500 that it's almost a knock for NASCAR that they're doing this. Like, they're almost knocking themselves out with this situation, right? And listen, I'm not, I support NASCAR, I support their series, but when you make a decision like this, I get suspensions. Like, I completely understand that. If you get suspended, like, you should be removed of your playoff points, depending on the situation. But I think no matter what, if you're suspended and it's for good reason, you should probably get removed of your playoff points, right? Like, but if you're doing something like Kyle Larson is doing, that's bigger than NASCAR, bigger than IndyCar, right? Like, he's doing something that not many drivers have been able to get to do, and they haven't actually successfully have done either. Like, I think Tony Stewart's the only guy who has actually ran the full double, do the entirety of the double, run both races in its entirety. So if Kyle Larson can do that, it's a bigger feat than anything else. Like, to penalize somebody like that, who's like one of their biggest names in the sport, it wouldn't make much sense to me. I feel like it's a disservice to the series, in my opinion.
I'm definitely agreeing. I agree with you. I think, especially because there is becoming more focus on all of these things, and there is becoming more crossover between all these kinds of racing fans. Yeah. It's a no-brainer that you want your star drivers to be dipping into all of those markets, just like you said. So,
run in the IMSA races too. Like, try to get them in everything. Like, that's the thing. You want to cross promote. That's how you build your brand. That's how you make it a global brand, right? That's how you get other people to want to join in, and to not allow, basically to say, listen, if if it's a non-medical reason, like running another race, like the Indy 500, we're going to crack down on that. Like, that's a harsh move by NASCAR, in my opinion. So, I don't know. We will see how this plays out. I mean, hopefully Larson will be able to make it back for the Charlotte race. I mean, hopefully all goes well, but I mean, you just never know. You never know if that race is going to get rained out like last year. Like, there's just so much that could go into making that become a thing, right? Like, making that become like a potential of happening. And I don't know. We're going to find out here coming up. But the other rule, and another interesting rule, was the exemption. And I'll get your take on it again. Basically, the way it will work is if the driver who doesn't qualify has a good enough resume, like a Helio Castroneves, for example, he will be exempted and be in the race. And this is obviously big, really, for the Daytona 500, which is really the only race that this will probably really get used for. This could be the Daytona 500 rule, basically, because most of the races are usually not over exceeding 40 cars. But this is a big news story, right? Big rule change because, you know, listen, I love having these big names on the grid. It's great for the series. It's great for bringing in the marketing and bringing in the promotional aspect of things. But to just gift an entry to a driver because based off of his resume, especially for the 500, where the stories are always coming during who's going to be in and who's going to be out during qualifying days, it kind of makes it just changes that dynamic for that week, right? It's I'm not a huge fan of it personally, and I'll get your thoughts here, Liam. I feel like I don't know. There's just something about it. I just don't. I'm not a big fan of. I don't like that they're just gifting an entry to. If they don't make it, they don't make it, and I think that's what makes the storyline, right? That's what, and I think it's just being a journalist. Like it's just you want to have those storylines sometimes, and it makes that week leading up interesting, and it kind of almost you got to almost feel bad for like other drivers, right, who don't make it. And it's like, well, you're just gifting somebody a Daytona 500 entry. Like these should be coveted. These should be like the Indy 500. You should have to earn that spot. If you don't earn it, you don't get in. That should be how it works. And I think that's my biggest take on it, and my biggest kind of 2 cents on it, if you will.
I 100% agree with you. And I think of, when we had Brayton Laster on last week, and he's talking about he's putting his blood, sweat, and tears into all of this stuff, and it's not easy for him. He's going to be
Mm-hmm.
on that racetrack with Helio Castroneves if all goes well. I wouldn't feel very good if I were him. And they said they're just going to give it to this guy, regardless. It's definitely hard for me not to see it as just having to do with the sponsors and the fact that there are people who want their names on those cars that Helio
Yeah.
and these people could be driving, and they want it one way or another, right? So that's my second objection with it. And the third is, like you just said, that's the whole point. But the qualifying, the bump days, that's where some of the greatest drama in the sport happens, right? That those storylines are like intoxicating to us as racing fans and as journalists,
Mm-hmm.
like you said. So you definitely feel like they're putting their hands on the scales, and it's kind of getting at the heart of what people love about this sport and that uncertainty and the competition of it.
Yeah, because first off, there's no way that Helio is not going to be exempted. Like, so he's guaranteed a spot. So it's like the next two races, like, I mean, obviously he'll probably try to put a good time in for qualifying. He probably would prefer having only 41 or 40 cars instead of being the extra 41. And he probably wants to qualify just for the sake of he wants to qualify, because he wants to. But in the duels, they don't have to do anything. Like they can just sit back and just watch everything play out and like just cruise. Like it's I mean, he probably won't do that. Like I know Helio enough, like as a driver watching him over the years, he's gonna want to race in these races, get that experience, learn the draft, if you will, in the stock, in the cup cars. But I just, you work so hard, right, to try to get into the Daytona 500, and then to basically just say, oh, we're gonna have an exempted driver because of his good resume and he's got so much success. It's like, again, like it takes away some of that drama, and and then it's like, well, then do you make a case like if Jimmy Johnson's gonna race, and if he doesn't make it, then you make a case, does Jimmy get in? Like you have to put Jimmy Johnson in. And if this is only specific to guys who are outside of NASCAR, then it's like, you're kind of divvying it away from the sport. Like you have to put Jimmy Johnson in the Daytona 500. If you're not going to put in Jimmy Johnson, then the point of this whole exemption is kind of pointless because you're not even giving your own big stars an opportunity to be in the race who have really paved the way for fans and for people within the series. I mean, Jimmy Johnson is arguably one of the biggest names in NASCAR. You have to have him in. So I'm very intrigued to see how this exemption is going to be played out. Like, what is that criteria? Like, we don't know what that criteria is. Like, what do they consider being a good resume? Like, that's like that's like going to a job interview and being like, yeah, you got a pretty good resume and such. Well, but but we're not going to give you the like. What's consider like? What do you consider a good resume? Like, I don't know like how they're going to judge that. That's going to be the most fascinating thing to me.
I mean, that's my other biggest question is like what you said. It's so vague. Like it doesn't seem like there is a criteria, and that's what makes it feel even a little more
And I
strange. And
might not
also,
read enough into it, so maybe that's also my problem as well. This is just something I had saw,
the
but
other thing I would also say is, man, if you're Trackhouse, this is the best rule ever, right? Like if you're the
you're gonna
people
get
who are
four
putting in.
cars into the freaking 500. It's
So, you
wild,
know, they're
wild.
probably really happy. And look, I love what they do in bringing some of these really talented drivers from outside the sport in.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that does not mean I think they should be in it just because it's cool. I think they should be in it because they're amazing drivers and they're proving that they can
Well,
take on that
and
challenge.
I think for charter teams they should automatically be in. I agree with that, but I also like you look at IndyCar, right? Oh, we lost our camera. Hold on, bear with me. Bear with me. We're gonna adjust this. Here we go. They're back.
Cool.
We're back. Okay, there we go. So as I was saying, you look at like IndyCar, right? Like no team is guaranteed for the Indy 500, and that's what I love about the Indy 500. Right? It's like even the charter teams this year aren't even going to be guaranteed for the Indy 500. Daytona has. I feel like the Daytona 500 that has to be a thing. Like I think that would make it so interesting. Like imagine like Chase Elliott not making the Daytona 500. Like be wild, wild. I mean, it probably wouldn't happen because of how strong those teams are. Like that's how it is in IndyCar. Like Penske's strong, Chip Ganassi's. Usually, all those teams are going to get all their drivers in. But I think that would be so fascinating. Like Graham Rahal has been on the cut line the last like couple of years, and he runs for Rahal Letterman, and they're usually a decent team. So I don't know. I think there are some things that NASCAR could definitely learn from IndyCar. Um, it's going to be a very interesting year for a lot of these series, man. It's going to be pretty wild. Another kind of new, interesting change or announcement that NASCAR made, or I guess I should say Kenny Wallace made. So this was announced, I believe, yesterday or Monday, and this was definitely a little bit disappointing news to come out from Kenny Wallace. But basically, it was announced that Mike Wallace, who was originally planned to run the race for the Daytona 500 with MBM Motorsports, um, unfortunately, Mike Wallace is not able to run the race because of a lack of running races in the past several years. He hasn't ran anything in about 5 years. Basically, NASCAR had said that he is not able to run not only the Daytona 500 but any NASCAR race here in 2025. And Mike apparently had went. This is all from Kenny Wallace. He had said this on his podcast, and it was actually a really good interview. I recommend you go watching it. It'll really give you the details and the context of everything that happened. But basically, Mike had went to NASCAR officials. Basically, had discussed the opportunity that was at the table or wanting to at least run the 500. Everybody seemed on board. Even the president of NASCAR is from what Mike Wallace had said. Unfortunately, though, Wallace apparently didn't go through the competition directing group. And that's kind of the big group that does everything. But he had thought he already was going through the right outlets in terms of getting this approved. So he thought he was all good and square. He got the ride with MBM. 2 weeks later, here we are. And Mike Wallace is now not running the 500. He has to basically would have to run a couple races this year at the local level or in some other capacity in order to be able to run any further races going forward for NASCAR. And Liam, I don't know about you, but this is for one, it's a shame because you have somebody who's been in the Daytona 500 11 times. He's raced in NASCAR. He's been in these cars before, obviously not in these versions of these cars, but you have somebody who's got the experience and then to just deny him, it's a little disappointing. I do understand though, like they want to keep it safe and they want to make sure that he's not, this isn't something where Mike isn't going to be basically just out of the pack, like has, basically just kind of not making a mockery, if you will, but just, maybe not competitive or maybe not up to speed with everything compared to some of his competitors. I mean, I can see both sides of the argument here, but for a guy who's been in NASCAR before, who has that track record, it is disappointing that he isn't going to be able to at least get a shot for the 500 because there are so many guys who just run the 500. You look at Travis Pastrana. I mean, I know he's ran occasional races, but guy doesn't. I don't think he ran many Cup races or really any NASCAR races prior to 20. Like five. He hadn't raced in a couple years, so I don't know how to feel about this, man. It's disappointing on a lot of levels. I hope that Mike is. He stays strong and hopefully he gets another ride maybe down the road, and maybe he'll try again next year. Maybe he'll get a couple races under his belt. I mean, his best bet would just be run some late model races, try to get some more racing under his belt, and try to work his way back into kind of getting another opportunity like this. But you also just never know with a guy who's 65 years old. That may have been his only opportunity to get back in the seat and race in the Daytona 500, and it's really a shame, man. It's disappointing when this news came out, and I do hope that he keeps his head up high and he's able to maybe find another spot here in the near future.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a weird, kind of awkward situation. I guess we do know that the exemption criteria, it's between Mike Wallace and Helio Castroneves. We don't know exactly where it is between that, but now we know what the bounds are, I guess. So it definitely has to sting a little bit where within like 3 days they're like, well, no, actually you can't run the race. But also, if we could have made you run the race if we wanted to, like that's a little funny.
Yeah, it's definitely disappointing. Obviously, again, definitely. Hopefully, he gets another opportunity. I mean, that's all I really could say. I mean, Mike has had a great career in NASCAR. If you look at his track record, again, he's won races within the series, and again, I get where NASCAR is coming from in terms of the safety aspect of things, and just unsure of how he would hold it up in a Cup car. I mean, it is a bit of a big change for him compared to what he rode, but I mean, the guy's a racer. He's been in racing cars before. It's not like this is something where he's just like stepping in for the first time. Like the guy's raced in racing in prior years. He just hasn't been recently, and it's the whole thing's kind of weird. I got mixed emotions about it, but we'll see if Mike Wallace can get another opportunity here in the near future. Um, Discussing some IndyCar news. Again, we mentioned this may go a little bit longer than usual on this show because there is a lot to get into. IndyCar news. The Fox commercial was amazing, by the way. First off, apparently NASCAR has a hold on Fox of what they can put out for their marketing, and I read this on Twitter, and because a lot of people
Hmm.
were angry that Fox got a really good commercial for the Indy 500 or for the Indy car opener, and with Joseph Newgarden that was hilarious, and people were a little angry, at least NASCAR fans, that why isn't NASCAR doing content like this, like that's kind of showcasing their drivers in like a fun sort of way and kind of promoting the series in a unique sort of way, and it's such an interesting thing, right? Like, I think IndyCar is allowing for a lot more leeway. For one, they know how important this deal is. Being on Fox every week is not something that you can just get for granted or take for granted, especially as a racing series. Like, that just doesn't happen. I mean, the biggest racing series is F1, and they are the only real racing series that has full green flag to checkered flag coverage of their races on ESPN, on a major news, like a major TV outlet. So having this series on every week on Fox is a massive deal. They have to promote this heavily, and IndyCar has to be open to just allowing the door and being open to promoting their series because they know how big of a deal this is, and they know that this could be a game changer for IndyCar.
100%. I mean, it's good to see that they are coming out swinging, and they also clearly understand what the objective is, which is to reintroduce Americans to not only IndyCar, but who are the big names, who are the people you need to be looking at. And I definitely think it goes to show that maybe NASCAR feels a little more comfortable in that regard, where they're like, yeah, everyone knows Daytona, everyone knows some of these bigger names, but maybe that is changing. And maybe this is IndyCar, and we kind of alluded to it earlier. Maybe IndyCar really is now starting to bring the fight a little bit more in that way. And I'm really interested to see over just the next year or two what the numbers say as far as, if IndyCar really starts drawing people back in again. And if that will eventually lead to a little competition, a little more competition with NASCAR. We'll
Yeah, I
see.
mean, you look at the commercial, right? Like they made Joseph Newgarden out to look like a star. Like they literally made him. When you add Tom Brady in the mix of the commercial, like where you're comparing, you're basically saying that he's more good looking than Tom Brady. He's got a better chin complexion than Tom Brady. You know you're trying to promote your drivers on a high level, and I feel like NASCAR sometimes doesn't do that. Like they don't promote their drivers like that on their commercials. Like having a commercial like that really showcases your driver and how big of a star he is within the series. That is a good like early move to get fans like intrigued about. And then when you add guys like Tom Brady, when you're introducing them, and I thought it was very well done. I'm very happy for IndyCar and what they did there. I hope they do maybe more commercials of some of their other drivers like Will Power, Scott Dixon. Some of those veterans you might know. Maybe they'll be kind of fun if they do something where they like have them in like an old retirement home or something like that, or like kind of like with walkers, or I don't know. I'm just blowing out, spitballing here, and maybe they could do kind of something, some fun little skits with that or something. And Pato O'Ward is another one as well. He was actually in that commercial as well. That he said his kid hated his children's book, but I thought was amazing. I thought that was amazing freaking clip there. I thought it was very well done. I'm happy that IndyCar is allowing Fox that leeway of showcasing the series in a bit of a different light. And again, I really do believe NASCAR can learn a lot from what IndyCar is doing right now in terms of the direction that they're going in and how they're presenting their series. Because listen, Daytona or NASCAR is a great series, and I love NASCAR. And as I mentioned here a little bit ago, but I do think there are some things where they're a bit more conservative about, and I think that in a day and age where media and social media is king, and stuff like this is going to really draw interest into the series where people want to like have that attention grabber, that's gonna be a big thing.
100%. And I think what NASCAR can learn from it more than anything is even if you're still technically in first place, that doesn't mean it's not a bad idea to kind of reintroduce yourself every once in a while. And
I
I do
agree.
think that is one thing that NASCAR has maybe been a little weak on the last couple of years where not everyone does know some of the younger, newer drivers in NASCAR, right? And there has been a lot of new faces in it recently. So it's not a bad thing to remind people what kind
I
of talent
agree.
they have.
No, I agree. I agree completely. I mean, I think this is a really big opportunity here for IndyCar. And I think, again, I think it's massive. And I've already been hearing rumors. I told you this, Liam, that Tom Brady also may be involved with an IndyCar project here. Apparently, Tom Brady and maybe involved here with Chip Ganassi Racing doing some stuff. I believe I forgot who it was. It was Tom Brady and somebody else they had mentioned would be involved with this effort, but Sebastian Bourdais may be the driver for it for the Indy 500. So you never know. You never know. Be
Seems like the
interesting.
racing bug has bit him the last few
I
years.
will
He
say I
wanted
will
this,
see
so.
Sebastian Bourdais tomorrow at Media Day. So maybe I'll get a chance to talk to him and ask him about that news. So there's definitely been a lot of rumor news on that I've been reading up on. So we will definitely keep an eye out on that as that becomes maybe something that may come to fruition here in the coming months. Other news we'll kind of get into briefly here. Long Beach, a lot of rumors came out this week that potentially Long Beach will be switched with Nashville. It was kind of light, if you will, in terms of the rumors, but given the ongoing wildfires that are happening in California, a lot of people definitely concerned. And Long Beach being kind of right in the epicenter, if you will, of Los Angeles and that kind of, uh, you know, uh, area, if you will. Definitely something that we will have to keep an eye on as it goes forward. Basically, the Nashville date is the season finale at Nashville Super Speedway. That means that Long Beach would switch to the season finale, which I wouldn't mind. I like Long Beach, and I think that would be what a way to end the year. I don't know how that would affect the IMSA schedule, given that their season finale is at Petit Le Mans, and I don't want that to change. So I don't know how that would affect the season schedule. The only thing I could think of is if it is in September, they still would want to do the Long Beach race in terms of it being the kind of season finale. IMSA could probably make that work and doing it after the Indianapolis race. So that might be something that Indy or IMSA would be open to, but We'll see, because they do have their West Coast swing in April and in May. So I don't know how much that would be difficult logistically for the teams coming up here, but that will definitely be something we'll keep an eye on. And then the other news: Jacob Abel is going to be joining Dale Coyne Racing. Obviously, one of the headmen over at Abel Motorsports in Indy Next. Finished second last year, ran a really good season in Indy Next. He will be with Dale Coyne Racing, a team that has kind of been uncertain the last couple of years. They've really kind of made their driver announcements like last minute, and there is still another entry that they will be running. So we're kind of unsure who that will be. A bit of a surprising news because there is some really big names still left on the board for IndyCar free agents. I mean, you look at it, you got Rinus VK and a couple other relatively strong names from last year that are kind of losing their spot due to the charter agreement and teams having to cut back on rides. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see, who that final driver will be, because that's all that's left. One more spot remains in the IndyCar grid in terms of that final driver spot being filled up. So we'll see. But Jacob Abel, definitely exciting to see him in the IndyCar series for next year. And there's definitely a lot of new faces coming into IndyCar next season. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see some of these new guys battling it out. I'm personally excited to see Robert Schwartzman battling it out in IndyCar with Prima. I think Prima might have a very interesting lineup for next year with Ilott and Schwartzman.
Absolutely. Prima, I'm actually really excited about. And I wrote about this in the article today because since they're not a charter team, theoretically, if anyone else does want to race one of these races, they could get eliminated. Like they would have to outqualify them, which
They could
probably
be a
isn't
third. They could be a
going
third
to
team,
happen.
and it might not be that hard.
Yeah, probably not going to happen, but it is kind of interesting and keeps them on their toes a little bit. And again, just goes to show you, how IndyCar is growing and people breaking in. Also interesting to see how you are seeing some contraction with the amount of cars teams run. It's
Mm-hmm.
becoming a little more F1 in that way, where it's more, most teams only have 2 cars now or 3 cars, not as many, 4 or 5 as it used to be. So
No,
very
and
very
even in
interesting.
F1, you're only getting 2 cars as well. So, yeah, it is definitely going to be interesting to see, kind of what ends up, happening with some of these open teams, if you will, for IndyCar. I don't know, what team would be in the mix for some of these open rides. I know Reinbold Racing is usually a team that always has a Indy 500 ride. I know that Ryan Hunter Ray is going to be running the Indy 500 this year, so there are going to be some intriguing, teams to keep an eye on that may pop up from time to time and maybe give some of these drivers an opportunity. I mean, the Indy 500, we're probably going to see 40 plus cars on the grid. I wouldn't be surprised. 30 to 40, somewhere in that capacity, we'll probably see trying to get into the field. And it's going to be exciting, man. It's going to be a lot of fun to see the field in full swing come the Indy 500. And I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be wild that it's going to be on Fox and like on a main television network. It's going to be, I think, some really big numbers. I'm looking forward to seeing how that will turn out there. Getting into some final news here. Big news happening today. Junior Motorsports announced that they will be running the Daytona 500. Justin Allgaier, who has been with the program at Junior Motorsports for a while, just recently won the Xfinity title. He will be the one to get the shot. It will not be his first time running in Daytona or in the Cup Series. He's been in the Cup Series prior before, and I believe he has run in the Daytona 500 also in the past. So this will not be his first time running in the 500, but it will be Junior Motorsports' first time running as a Cup team, which is definitely an exciting announcement. Obviously, Liam, and I know Dale Jr. is one of the biggest names in racing, and to have one of his, to have his team now fielded a car in the 500. It's been a rumor for a while that he's been interested in running Cup races, but it's finally come to fruition. Pretty exciting stuff to see Dale Jr. having his own team in the 500. And you imagine that he'll probably get some help from a lot of the Hendrick guys, given that Hendrick's got some ties with Junior, and I would imagine he'll probably get some help from Spire and Trackhouse and all those teams that are kind of neat, closely niched together, if you will. But it's gonna be a lot of fun. I can't wait for this event coming up here and to see another open car added to the grid. This is gonna be an open team, but I do think it's gonna be a very strong team given some of the backing that they have with Hendricks and some of these other organizations.
100%. Raise hail, praise Dale. That's what I say.
I
Say it
like
when I
it.
wake up. I say it when I go to bed every day.
Do you really? Do you really? It's an interesting thing. I've never learned about you. That's I like it. I like it. I like it. Final thing, and before we kind of preview the weekend here, if you will, Jamie Chadwick will be the Grand Marshal for the Rolex 24. Obviously, Jamie about to embark on a kind of joint Genesis thing, if you will. She's going to be running some LMP2 stuff this year in sports car racing. She actually is going to be fully focused on that. She will actually no longer be in Indy next year, which is going to be disappointing not to see her at the IndyCar race in St. Pete come March, but excited for what's to come for her. She's obviously really building an exciting career. Her and obviously Robert Wickens were our good buddies, if you will, our good friends at Portland. And very happy to see her get an opportunity to kind of represent women in motorsports for this upcoming weekend. I mean, she is building a really exciting platform, and she has an exciting platform too. I think it would be cool to hopefully she does some content this weekend as well. I think there's a lot that can be done here. And hey, maybe one day she will get a Rolex 24 opportunity to race in this race. I do think that is only a matter of time until she gets a chance to run it.
I completely agree. It definitely seems like she's making a pretty hard pivot to the endurance racing, which she
Mm-hmm.
had kind of implied was maybe a possibility a couple years ago. I'm a little disappointed to see her leaving the IndyCar sphere because I feel like she did kind of fit in
She
there,
did.
but
There was apparently an announcement that said that she will be doing a Formula E rookie test. So I do think Formula E is still on the table. I don't think that is an option. I think it's much more doable to do Formula E and sport car racing. We see a lot of that with a lot of the drivers that are here this weekend. Four guys are in Formula E. That's a lot of drivers from the series. So, I think it is very possible that we could see Jamie maybe do some endurance stuff and do Formula E and kind of service both of her kind of wants, being in a top level open wheel seat because IndyCar is becoming challenging now with the charter entries and, teams are limited. So maybe going to Andretti isn't as good of an option as it could have been. Maybe now going to Andretti's Formula E team might be more of an option than anything else. Maybe being a reserve driver. There's a lot of options for her going forward.
yeah, 100%.
So a lot of excitement there. Obviously, looking forward to see Jamie get the Rolex 24 started next week. But we have the Roar before the 24 this week, Liam, and it is going to be an exciting Roar before the 24 at that. It will be a pretty busy weekend. It's basically a test weekend due to the fact that they moved the qualifying to Thursday. So it really isn't much in terms of racing. There is two races up for the VP Racing Fuel Sports Car Challenge, which will feature 33 entries on the grid between LMP3 GTD or GSX, excuse me, and the brand new GTD X class, which will feature 9 entries. That is all GT3 machinery. So we'll have GT4s, GT3s, and LMP3s on the grid. Other stuff going on this weekend as well at Daytona will also be the Michelin Pilot Challenge, which will also be testing this weekend as well. They will have a pretty hefty grid of 37 entries on the grid. And then as for the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship for their test events, they will be having 61 cars on the grid for their testing weekend. Again, it's all a test really for them this weekend. Last year it did mean more when they had the qualifying, but it is a great weekend though. If you're a fan of racing, if you're a fan of sports cars, it's affordable, it's cheap. You get to see a couple races as well with the VP Racing Fuel Sports Car Challenge, which I think is actually going to be very exciting to keep an eye on this weekend. We will be keeping an eye on in a different way as we will end the show off with kind of our announcement, if you will. So we'll wrap up with that there. It's gonna be exciting, man. I'm looking forward to being at the track again and getting a chance to be at these races. It's gonna be great to see some of these entries on the grid. It's good. I feel like this weekend there's not as much pressure for these top series teams, in the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship because now you don't have qualifying. You can just kind of focus on getting these guys acclimated. Some of these guys haven't had a chance to be on the track and racing at Daytona in a couple months. So this is a really good opportunity to be able to kind of get testing in, get lap time, get seat time, and give guys a chance to kind of get reacclimated to the car in a much more a less pressurous way than it would have been if they had qualifying on Sunday. So I appreciate that, and it is still a big weekend because they're going to set a lot of the BOP tables and kind of do kind of a performance test, which will help set up a lot of things coming up for the season. So I do think that there is something to be had for this weekend, but it is going to be a lot less pressurous for teams heading in to before heading into next week. So it'll be a nice kind of relaxing weekend before next week.
Cool. Pressurous is a great word. I'm absolutely stealing that. I will use it in a lot of things. Race car driving is very pressurous, so I understand. It's probably very nice to have this this kind of thing. And as you said, it's not just the racing, right? It's the vibes, it's the kind of sense, the atmosphere of the racetrack itself, and it's a celebration. It's the coolest thing in the world to get to come and participate in this kind of thing. So it's cool you get more time to do it.
It's like being at Le Mans, man. It's kind of like the Le Mans weekend. It's just exciting. There's a lot of fun things happening. Just taking a look at the schedule for this weekend. Again, not a very busy slate. Everything will kick off on Friday afternoon. So you got Friday, you got practice for the VP Racing Fuel Sports Car Challenge at 8:30. Michelin Pilot Challenge goes out for their first practice at 9:30. WeatherTech will have two practices, and then Michelin Pilot Challenge and VP Racing Fuel Sports Car Challenge will have another practice again on Friday. Saturday, it will be qualifying for the VP race, plus the race actually happening 1:55 to 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time. So there'll be more practices, and then plus the race for the VP Racing Sports Car Challenge. Same thing goes for Sunday, a little bit more practicing. The day will wrap up at 4 o'clock, but there will be that one race left for the VP Racing Sports Car Challenge before the weekend wraps up at 2:30 to 4 for the WeatherTech practice, the final one before we get ready for next week's Rolex 24. It's going to be an exciting week, and Liam, a lot of big names. Kevin Magnussen's on this list. You got F1 stars. You got guys who are champions in other disciplines. It is going to be a very, very exciting next 2 weeks at Daytona. There's so much talent. The grids are expanded. It is going to be a really fun 2 weeks.
Absolutely, man. I'm extremely jealous for you. I hope you have a great time. I'm very much looking forward to your coverage. And I'm looking forward to see who wins the race. And I'm going to try to stay up for as many hours as I can. You said your record was what, 23 hours?
23 to 24 last year. I did it 23, 24. You can have your own 24-hour event at your house, my friend.
I will try. We'll see. We'll see.
We'll be in two different parts of it.
I don't exactly have many friends to invite to watch this with me who would know what's going on.
We'll do one day we'll do a watch party when I can't go to the races anymore. Like in terms of we'll do like a watch party or something. So, sure. And hopefully that's not anytime soon, but we'll see. Nevertheless, so yeah, the races for this weekend, you can watch them on Peacock, on IMSA TV, YouTube. Basically, you can watch them anywhere. They're easy to access. So tune in this weekend. Going to be a lot of fun. Other racing going on this weekend as well. We had the Chili Bowl currently happening. I messed up last week. I thought it was last week. I had a lot on my mind last week with getting ready for ARCA testing, but it is this week. It's going on right now. A lot of racing going on until Saturday. Couple big names as well competing in the Chili Bowl, so really exciting going on there. Definitely check things out as they're racing over in Oklahoma in one of the biggest sprint car weeks of the year. And to close things off again, Supercross in San Diego as they continue their West Coast swing, as they will be out on the West Coast for another 3 races, San Diego, Anaheim, and then Glendale. We're coming to Tampa, baby. We're coming to Tampa, and we get the first East race of the season. I'm actually kind of excited. I didn't even realize that we were the first East race of the season. So going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to them to coming over to the East Coast. Obviously, a lot's been going on over at the West Coast. And before we do close out on making our announcement, we do want to, send our condolences, and our thoughts and our prayers are with everybody who's been affected by the wildfires out in California. Definitely really devastating things that have been happening. And we hope that everybody's able to stay safe through these times, these challenging times. We've being in Tampa, being in Florida, we understand what people have gone through, given we've had 2 hurricanes last year. It was a very challenging time for all of us, even for us who weren't really affected. We still had a lot of scheduling issues, and I know that's the least of anybody's worries. But for people who have been affected by any of these wildfires, our thoughts are with you, and hopefully you guys are able to recuperate and hopefully stay safe through these times. It's definitely a challenging thing, and it's wild to see some of these photos, man. They're coming out on the news of these wildfires. It's pretty crazy.
Absolutely. All the first responders, everyone who's been affected, and also the journalists who are following this and standing next to these places and these people as they try to, keep the worst from happening. So all those
Yeah,
people, heroes.
absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, we're going to wrap up here on the show. But before we do have a big announcement to make. And Liam, you're excited about this too, I know. But big announcement this weekend. We are going to be partnered, collabing, if you will, with De Benedetto Racing this weekend for the VP Racing Fuel Sports Car Challenge races. That is right. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we will be at the track. We will be covering the behind the scenes of the team and kind of showcase what it goes into preparing for an IMSA weekend. Gonna be a lot of fun, man. I am pumped for this. Um I cannot wait. I'm super excited. Um we will have showcasing the hauler. We're going to showcase a lot of different things. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. And, can't wait to be out there at the track for the weekend with De Benedetto Racing. Thank you so much to Justin De Benedetto, who will be driving in the entry this weekend for the team. And then obviously his father, Tony De Benedetto, who's a team principal. It is going to be fun to be basically, giving them some coverage, giving them some promotion. They're going to be running the number 4 Porsche 718 GT4 RS Cayman this weekend. Again, De Benedetto Racing. It's a red-white livery, red and white livery. A little bit of blue, I believe, hinted in as well. Cynthia AI will be on board. Launch Capital, which I believe is Justin's business or one of his businesses. And Erwin Lowy LLP will all be on the car this weekend, racing in the GSX class. So, Liam, you have a team to root for this weekend. De Benedetto Racing is going to be our team we're going to be rooting for. We're hoping that they can bring home the checkered. Be awesome. Be great if we can, get to see them in victory lane celebrating. It's gonna be a lot of fun, man. Really excited to get to work with Justin and his team this weekend in terms of kind of doing some collabing coverage, and we're looking forward to being at the track and giving them some highlights, if you will. So it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Cool, man. I'll be looking for you on the broadcast. Maybe I'll catch you in the corner or something.
Listen, we got a lot of cool things. I don't want to spoil all of it because we're going to be putting it all in a big vlog, and you guys are going to be able to see it. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys will learn some things about what it takes to be in an IMSA weekend, because that's one thing, man, is not a lot of fans know what it's like to prepare for these weekends and what it takes to bring a team, especially even a smaller team, within one of these support series. It still does take a lot to set up, and they got their hauler already at Daytona. Again, it's going to be a blast. Cannot wait. And we're excited to hopefully see Justin tomorrow at Media Day, and looking forward to being there and getting to talk to him and get this season started, man. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. So with that being said, we want to sign off here. Again, thank you to all of our partners, to Benedetto Racing, to CGM, City Garage Motorsports. Again, we were out there last week. Go check out some of our content. We got some. We're gonna get some photos up on our Instagram page and some other outlets as well. They've been very supportive. We're actually riding on the car for the 2025 season. Liam, I believe. Did you see it on Twitter? It's quite amazing. It's quite amazing, to say the least, to see it on the car. And Becca again did a great job last week. Excited to see how she does here in February coming up. Thank you to the Tampa Bay Auto Museum. Really awesome to get to go check out their location. We will have an article coming up here this week. Been a bit behind on some things, so we will have an article up for them this week as we got the chance to tour their facility, get to check out some of their amazing history. And that's also on our YouTube page as well. And Liam, it is pretty awesome some of the history in there is wild. It is wild. And go check them out. They're in Pinellas Park. Really affordable, and it is definitely if you're a car guru, if you enjoy just the innovation and technology, even this is a place you got to go check out. It's pretty remarkable to learn about the technology that's in these cars, and for their time, it's impressive to see. So thank you so much to those partners. We appreciate it, and obviously we're looking forward to what's to come here in 2025. Liam Racing is back, baby. Let's go. I'm excited. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Absolutely, man. It's going to be a great year.
Oh, yeah, man, it's going to be awesome. Looking forward to it. I have my mic muted. Sorry about that. So we will close things off here with that. My name is Dylan Spalding. That's Liam Herbert. Thank you so much for tuning in here to Auto Racing Digest. We will see you on the flip side. I'll be seeing you, everyone, here at Daytona this weekend. It'll be a lot of fun. Liam, let's go racing, my friend. That's what Stuart Weiss says. Let's go racing, brother.
Let's go racing, man. Thanks for tuning in.